You ever find yourself in a moment you can't take back? I mean, not just a mistake. Not just a poor decision you regret in the morning. I'm talking about one of those moments that change you. That rip something open inside you and make it impossible to ever go back to who you were before. Because that's what this is. This isn't just some story about cheating. It's not a scandal. It's not gossip. It's a confession. I didn't go looking for him. He wasn't mine. Hell, he never was. But that didn't stop it. He was married. His wife was out of town. And I should have known better. But see, the truth is, I was lonely. Not the kind of lonely where you just want company for a night. I'm talking about the kind of lonely where silence feels like it's drowning you. And then came Mark. God. Mark. He walked into my life like he already knew the part he was gonna play. Like he'd read the pages before I'd even written them. We weren't supposed to happen. But from the moment he looked at me, I think some part of me knew we would. It started with small things. You know? An extra long glance in the hallway. A laugh that lingered just a little too long. Him noticing things no one else did, like how I always wore that same green sweater when I was having a rough day. He paid attention. And when you've been invisible for long enough, being seen feels like oxygen. I'm not telling you this to make you like me. In fact, you probably won't. But I need you to understand one thing. Behind every messy, complicated, morally gray story, there's a person. A human being. With flaws. With needs. With pain. And my story, it started on a Tuesday afternoon. When his wife was on a business trip. When the rain wouldn't stop falling. And when Mark knocked on my door, just to borrow some sugar. Isn't that how it always starts? You think you're just being polite. Just helping. Just listening. But hearts are tricky things. And mine. Well, mine had been starving for so long, I didn't realize I was about to feed it poison. So yeah, judge me. Tell me I crossed a line. Tell me I ruined something that wasn't mine to touch. You're probably right. But listen to the whole story first. Because if you've ever been so alone you could scream into a pillow and still not feel heard. If you've ever wanted someone so badly it physically ached just to be near them. If you've ever done the one thing you swore you'd never do. Then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand. I'm Alyssa. And this is the story of how I almost became someone else's secret. I used to think heartbreak was loud. You know, screaming, crying, throwing things. But mine wasn't like that. Mine was quiet. It crept in slowly day after day until silence became my roommate. I'd been divorced for almost a year. No messy cheating or fireworks, just two people slowly realizing they didn't fit anymore. And when he left, he didn't slam the door. He just stopped trying. So I built a little world for myself. A quiet apartment in a quiet building on the east side of town. I'm a freelance editor. I work from home, so my days blurred into one another. Wake up. Coffee. Manuscripts. Maybe a walk. Dinner alone. Sleep. Repeat. And yeah, the silence got heavy. But after a while, I stopped noticing the weight. Like carrying a bag you've worn so long, it just becomes part of you. That was the rhythm of my life. Until Mark and his wife Clara moved into the unit across from mine. They were one of those couples that looked like they belonged in a magazine ad. Early 40s, fit, well-dressed. She was tall and graceful with this effortless confidence. He was warm and charming, the kind of man who looked you in the eyes when he asked how your day was going. I barely noticed them at first. A passing smile in the hallway, a nod on trash day. But everything changed one afternoon. It was raining. I'd just come back from the store, trying to juggle way too many bags because I refused to make 2 trips. And of course, halfway up the stairs, the bottom of one bag ripped open, apples, cans, everything spilling across the hallway. I dropped down, frustrated, muttering under my breath, trying to gather it all, when I heard his voice for the very first time. Here, let me help you with that. I looked up, and there he was. Mark. He had this easy smile, like the kind people carry when they're used to being liked. No flirting. No agenda. Just kind. He scooped up a few runaway apples and handed them back to me. "I'm Mark," he said. "My wife Clara and I just moved in across the hall." I nodded, brushing hair out of my face. "I'm Alyssa. Welcome to the building." Simple. Harmless. But something about the way he looked at me, not in a flirty way, more like he was really seeing me. It had been a long time since anyone looked at me like that. After that day, we ran into each other more often. Morning nods turned into brief conversations. He'd catch me by the mailboxes. "Still working on that manuscript?" Or, "Need help carrying that?" At first, I thought nothing of it. But it's funny how small habits grow roots. How familiarity sneaks up on you. Soon, our chats got longer. He'd ask questions, real ones, about my work, about what I like to read. He listened, really listened. He told me Clara was in tech, always traveling for meetings, conferences. He worked from home too, marketing consultant or something like that. I started looking forward to the sound of his door opening, and I hated that I did. Then one evening, it changed. It was late, maybe after 9. I'd just come back from a walk in the rain. The hallway smelled like wet concrete and lavender from someone's diffuser. I noticed a stack of mail poking out of Mark and Clara's box, clearly forgotten. I hesitated, then pulled it out, carried it across the hall, and knocked. He opened the door in a black t-shirt and sweats, barefoot. There was music playing low in the background, old jazz, maybe Miles Davis. "Oh, thanks," he said, taking the envelopes. "You didn't have to." "No worries," I smiled. "Didn't want your bills getting soggy." He paused, just for a second, then stepped aside. "You want to come in for a minute? It's pouring out there." I should have said no. I had work to do. I was tired. It was late. But I didn't. I stepped inside. His apartment was warm, cozy, smelled like cinnamon and cedarwood. A single lamp lit the room in gold. A half-finished whiskey sat on the table beside a book of poetry. It didn't feel like I was stepping into someone's married home. It felt lonely. Like mine. He poured me a glass of wine. We talked about music, books. He asked me why I liked editing, what it felt like to work with words all day. No one had ever asked me that before. And I remember thinking, this feels good. Not in a romantic way. Just human, connected. He never said anything inappropriate. He didn't touch me. But I felt something shift that night. Maybe he did too. Looking back, maybe that was the first moment it really started. Not when we kissed. Not when things got messy. But there, in the soft glow of a living room lamp, with jazz humming low and words dancing between two people who shouldn't have felt that close. I didn't see it coming. But if I'm honest, maybe I wanted to. And that was just the beginning. It wasn't physical. Not yet. But he saw me, really saw me, in a way I hadn't felt in years. And when you've gone that long feeling invisible, being seen feels like sunlight on skin that's been cold for too long. It started with little things. Harmless things. Or at least, that's what I told myself. One morning, I was rushing to a client call, already late, laptop in one hand, coffee in the other. And of course, my car refused to start. I tried once. Twice. Nothing but that choking, mechanical cough. I cursed under my breath, already picturing the email I'd have to send. Sorry for the delay, technical issues. Then I heard a knock on my driver's side window. It was Mark. He crouched down, smiling. Need a hand? I should have said I had it under control. I didn't. Before I could finish explaining, he was under the hood. His hands, confident, steady, worked with the kind of calm that made it feel like no problem was really that big. 10 minutes later, the engine turned over. I thanked him. Too many times. He just shrugged and said, "Glad to help." And then, his eyes lingered on mine. Just a second too long. No words, No flirting. But something passed between us in that moment. Something electric. A week later, I mentioned offhandedly that my kitchen faucet had been leaking. I wasn't complaining, just making conversation. The next day, he showed up at my door holding a wrench and a roll of plumber's tape. I figured you could use a hand, he said. He didn't ask. He just came. And while he worked, we talked. About stupid stuff at first. Leaky pipes, annoying neighbors, the smell of burnt toast coming from the downstairs apartment. But then it got deeper. I told him about my divorce. How silence had become the soundtrack to my marriage in the last year. He told me Clara was always on a plane, always somewhere else. And the more we talked, the more I felt it. That low hum of something unspoken. Something neither of us had named, but both of us felt. One evening, I invited him in for a drink. It was late. The kind of late where the world goes quiet and everything feels a little too honest. We sat on my old thrift store couch. One lamp on. A bottle of red wine breathing between us. We talked for 3 hours. About art. About the kind of books that change you. About the dreams we let go of. And the things we wish we'd done differently. He told me he'd once wanted to be a painter. That his life turned toward marketing only because art doesn't pay the mortgage. I laughed. Said something like, "At least you had the courage to try." And he looked at me, long and quiet, then said, "If I'd met you 10 years ago." He didn't finish the sentence. But he didn't have to. My skin went cold and warm all at once. And I remember, I laughed. Nervously. I deflected. Changed the subject. But inside, I was spiraling. I kept telling myself it was innocent. We were just friends. Just neighbors. But then, why did my heart race every time I heard his door open? Why did I find myself waiting, listening, for his footsteps in the hallway? Why did I start wearing lip gloss to take the trash out? Why did I replay his voice in my head at night? And imagine what it would feel like if he said my name the way a lover might? There were moments I wanted to reach out and touch his hand. Just to know what it felt like. I didn't. But God, I wanted to. One afternoon, we stood at the mailboxes. The light in the hallway was golden, warm, the kind of lighting that softens sharp edges. He reached for his envelope. Our fingers brushed. It was nothing. But everything. And when I looked up, his eyes were already on me. Hungry. Haunted. Guilty. Like he knew. Like we knew. I remember walking back to my apartment with shaking hands. This was when I should have pulled away. This was the red flag moment. The flashing warning sign. He was married. I wasn't confused. I knew exactly what I was playing with. But when something feels good, when it fills the ache in you that's been echoing for years, logic becomes background noise. And so I let it grow. Not physically, but in every space between our words. In every glance that lingered too long. In every moment where the air between us felt so heavy with tension, I could taste it. I didn't know it then, but I was standing on the edge of something that would change me forever. Something that would make me question everything I thought I knew about love. About loneliness. About who I was when no one was looking. And I hadn't even taken the first step yet. But the fall? It was coming. And I couldn't stop it. That night, the world outside blurred behind rain-covered windows. And inside, something shifted. Something real. It had been raining for hours, heavy, steady, the kind of rain that makes everything feel slower, softer, more dangerous. Clara was out of town again. Some retreat in Asheville. Yoga, silence, self-care. Mark mentioned it in passing a few days earlier. I had nodded, said something neutral, but I remembered. And on that night, with the storm outside and a strange ache in my chest, I heard a knock on my door. It was Mark. His hair was wet, his shirt clinging just slightly to his skin. He was holding the box I'd left downstairs, too heavy for me to carry alone. "I figured you could use a hand," he said. His voice was casual. Too casual. And mine? I just smiled. "Come in," I said. "You'll catch cold out there." I don't know why I invited him to stay. I could have said thank you, taken the box, and ended it there. But instead, I offered him a drink. We sat on the couch, side by side. Too close. Our knees brushed. Neither of us moved. I remember putting on an old film, some black and white classic. I couldn't even tell you which one. I didn't watch a second of it. What I did watch was the flicker of light from the screen bouncing off his face. The way his fingers drummed gently against his knee. The way his breathing slowed when he looked at me. It was like sitting inside a quiet storm. No words, no movement. But every second, the pressure built. And then he turned toward me. Just slightly. His voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to pretend anymore, he said. That sentence? It split me in two. Because the truth is, I was pretending. Pretending I wasn't craving him. Pretending this wasn't real. Pretending I wasn't already picturing what his mouth might feel like on mine. In that second, the dam inside me broke. All the self-control I'd clung to for weeks suddenly felt like paper in a flood. I looked at him. He looked at me. And for the briefest second, we leaned in. Our lips were inches apart. My breath hitched. His hand hovered near my cheek. The air felt electric. Like we were standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to jump. But then, I pulled back. My heart was racing, my skin burning, and every voice inside me was screaming something different. I stood up. Too fast. Mark, I said. My voice cracked. You should go. He didn't argue. He didn't push. He just looked at me, like he understood everything I didn't have the courage to say out loud. And then slowly, painfully, he stood, walked toward the door. His hand rested on the handle for a moment. He didn't open it right away. I remember him saying without turning around, I didn't plan this. I didn't expect you. But now, I can't stop thinking about you. And then he left. I stood in the middle of the room, shaking, torn. The warmth of his presence still clung to the air, and I hated how much I wanted him to come back. I pressed my fingertips to my lips like I'd already kissed him. But I hadn't. Not yet. And that night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the rain and trying to silence the storm inside me. I told myself I'd done the right thing, that I'd stopped it in time. But deep down I knew this wasn't over. Something had been set in motion, and it was only a matter of time. What scared me the most wasn't that I'd almost kissed a married man. What scared me was how much I didn't regret it. The next time, I didn't stop it. I didn't hesitate. I didn't pull away. I told myself it was just a moment, just a mistake, one we wouldn't repeat. But you and I both know that was a lie. It started quietly, like all dangerous things do. No big gestures. No grand declarations. Just an unlocked door and a late-night knock. That first night, he didn't speak much. Neither did I. He brought wine, red, full-bodied, bold. I remember how it tasted on his lips. We sat close. Too close. Again. But this time, I didn't move away when his hand found my thigh. I didn't look down when his eyes searched mine. And when he leaned in, I met him halfway. It didn't feel like a betrayal in that moment. It felt like air. Like water. Like finally breathing again after holding it in for too long. That night, we didn't sleep. We explored each other, not just with our hands, but with our words. He told me about his childhood. About the pressure of being the responsible one. About how Clara used to laugh in her sleep. Before she stopped laughing altogether, I told him about my divorce. About how silence became a third person in my marriage. About how I used to cry in the shower so no one could hear. And somehow, in that dim apartment, with the rain still whispering outside, we felt safe. Wrong, but safe. It became a rhythm. He would text me late. Can I see you? And I'd leave the door unlocked. Sometimes we didn't talk. Other times, we talked too much. There were nights we sat on my floor, backs against the wall, fingers intertwined, just breathing in the dark. There were mornings I'd wake up alone, the sheets still warm where he'd been. I'd run my hand across the empty space, clutch the fabric like it held some truth I wasn't ready to admit. And still, every time we were together, it felt right. Every time we weren't, the guilt clawed at me. The lies began to multiply. Just tired, I'd say to friends. Working late, he'd say to Clara. I became an expert at pretending. Pretending I wasn't waiting for his knock. Pretending I didn't check my phone 5 times an hour. Pretending I didn't know what this made me. And yet, there was intimacy. Real intimacy. He once told me he had dreams about me, ones where we lived by the coast, where mornings smelled like salt and coffee, and there were no clocks. I wanted to believe in that dream. I wanted to disappear into it. But dreams don't survive daylight. I started noticing things. Little things. Like how he'd flinch when I mentioned the future. How quickly he dressed afterward. How his eyes flicked toward the door when his phone buzzed. And how every time we said goodbye, it felt a little more final. Still, I let it continue. Because when he looked at me, really looked at me, I didn't feel invisible anymore. I felt chosen, desired, seen. And that feeling? That feeling can make a person do anything, even become the version of themselves they swore they'd never be. I knew it couldn't last. That secret things never stay secret forever. But I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Not when every stolen moment felt more vivid than entire years of my life. Not when his arms felt more like home than my own apartment ever did. So I told myself it wasn't love. That it was just comfort. Just chemistry. Just something I needed to feel human again. But in the quiet, in the dark, in those sacred stolen hours, it felt like love. And that was the most dangerous lie of all. And maybe I thought if we kept it hidden, it couldn't hurt anyone. But secrets have a way of spilling. Even when you think you've buried them deep. Especially then. It was never going to stay hidden forever. You can only lie to the world and to yourself for so long. What begins in shadows doesn't stay there. Not when you're playing with fire. Clara's best friend, Lila, was the kind of woman who noticed things. She had that sharp, polished kind of presence, manicured, always a step ahead. And she didn't like me. She never did. One Saturday, she dropped by their place unexpectedly, some casserole dish in hand. Clara was still out of town. Mark had come over earlier that morning, just for a quick cup of coffee, he said. I hadn't even brushed my hair. We sat on my couch like we always did, legs tangled, his hand on my thigh, like the world had disappeared. But I made a mistake. I left my earrings in the pocket of his coat, the one he threw on in a rush when he heard her knock. I didn't even know, not at first. It wasn't until the next day, when Mark came over pale, shaken, barely able to meet my eyes, that I realized something had shifted. He said Lila saw them. She asked whose they were, he muttered, pacing my apartment like a trapped animal. I told her they were Clara's, that maybe she forgot she wore them. But we both knew Clara never wore gold. From that day forward, the air between us changed. Paranoia crept in. He checked his phone more, double-locked his apartment door, spoke in hushed tones like someone was always listening. And still, he wanted more. More time. More risk. He started texting during the day, not just at night. Little messages like, thinking of you, wish I could come by, or miss the way you laugh at the dumbest things. It was flattering, addictive, but also terrifying. Then, my sister came to visit. Emily. She's the only person who really knows me. Knows when I'm faking a smile. Knows when I've built walls instead of asking for help. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. She studied me for a long time, longer than was comfortable. Then she asked softly, Alyssa, is there someone? I froze. Lied. Said no. Just work. Same old. But she didn't buy it. You look different. Like you're waiting for something. Or someone. I wasn't sleeping. Not deeply. Every creak in the hallway made my heart race. Every time Clara posted something online, a photo of them smiling, of their dog curled on the couch, I felt this sick pit in my stomach. I hated her, then hated myself for hating her. She hadn't done anything wrong, and yet, I wanted her life. Or maybe just the version of it Mark showed me. One night, after another rushed goodbye, I snapped. I turned to him, still half-dressed, still flushed with guilt, and I said, "Why are you doing this, Mark?" I expected deflection, an excuse, maybe silence. But instead, he looked right at me, eyes burning with something I couldn't name, and said, "Because when I'm with you, I feel alive." And for a second, I believed it, because wasn't that what I wanted too? To feel something again? To feel seen again? To feel wanted, after years of invisibility? But that answer, "I feel alive," it didn't settle me. It shook me, because what happens when I'm not there? When he's back in his perfect home, sitting across from his wife, sipping wine at their candlelit dinner table, does he feel dead then? And what does that make me? His escape? His fix? His lie? We started fighting. Small things at first. Where he'd been. Why he didn't answer. Why he looked distracted when we were together. Then bigger things. Like when I asked, "Would you ever leave her?" And he said nothing, just blinked, looked away, changed the subject. He wanted more. And I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Some days, I fantasized about us running away. A new city, new names, clean slate. Other days, I wanted it all to end. The hiding, the aching, the way I kept checking the hallway for shadows, for whispers behind closed doors. The guilt was a second skin by then. But so was the longing. I had become someone I didn't recognize. Jumping at every phone buzz. Second-guessing every word. Watching the woman across the hall, his wife, and feeling both envy and shame at once. I was splitting in two. And no one knew. Not Emily. Not Clara. Not even Mark. Because even he only saw the part of me I let him see. The rest. The broken, scared, lonely part. That stayed buried. Until it couldn't anymore. I thought I could control it. Keep it contained. But secrets, they rot. And eventually, they rise. Up next, everything unravels. The night it all came crashing down. I never meant to hurt anyone. But secrets, they have a way of clawing their way to the surface. Especially the ones you bury the deepest. They don't stay silent. They whisper. They wait. And then one day, they scream. It happened on a Monday. Rain again. Always the rain. Mark was cold that morning. Distant. He didn't kiss me goodbye. Didn't linger at the door like he usually did. I thought maybe he was regretting us. Maybe he was finally waking up. But that wasn't it. Later that night, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Fast. Sharp. Uncontrolled. A knock on my door, no, a bang. And when I opened it, it wasn't Mark. It was Clara. She was shaking. Phone in hand. Eyes swollen. Not from sleep, but from crying. She held it out. No words. Just the screen. A message from me, lit up. Last night was a mistake. Don't come again. I felt the blood drain from my body. My legs barely held me up. And then she spoke. Not loud. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just broken. I trusted you. I asked you to water my plants while I was gone. I opened my mouth. I wanted to say something. Anything. I didn't mean to, I started. But what could I possibly say that would make it better? There was nothing. No apology big enough. No excuse honest enough. Only silence. And the sound of her sobs as she backed away from me. Like I was something filthy. The moment I saw the look on Clara's face, I knew I had just broken something I could never fix. It wasn't just her marriage. Or my sense of right and wrong. It was the illusion. The fantasy I had built in my head. That love, even stolen love, could somehow lead to something real. But that moment stripped it all away. It wasn't passion anymore. It was betrayal. It was pain. It was me, standing in the ruins of my own choices. Mark didn't come that night. Or the next. I didn't sleep. Didn't eat. I just kept seeing her face. The way her voice cracked when she said, "I invited you in." And she had. Not just into her home, but into her trust, her friendship, her world. And I torched it. I wasn't the victim. Not anymore. Maybe I never was. And now, I had to live with what I'd done. Because sometimes the worst part of the truth is knowing it was you who set the fire, and no one else is coming to put it out. He stopped calling. She moved out. And I stayed. Stayed in the same apartment, same hallway, same couch where everything had started. But nothing felt the same. The days blurred. Mornings bled into nights. Nights into mornings. I started sleeping with the TV on. Not for noise, but to drown the silence that screamed at me when the room was still. Wine replaced breakfast. Cold takeout sat untouched on the counter. And the only time I went outside was to walk nowhere in particular. Just walk. Aimless. Hoping the wind would strip the shame off my skin. I started writing again. Not for work. Not for clients. Just to feel something. To figure out how I'd gotten so lost. I filled 3 journals in 2 weeks. Not with pretty sentences. Just raw thoughts. Fragments. Truths. Lies I told myself. I wrote things like, I didn't fall in love with him. I fell in love with being seen. I was lonely, but I wore it like perfume and convinced myself I was fine. I think I wanted to be chosen, even if it meant choosing wrong. Eventually, I booked a therapy appointment. It took everything in me to show up. To sit across from someone and say out loud, I slept with someone's husband. To admit, it wasn't just about him. It was about the hole I was trying to fill. That was the moment the real unraveling began. Because I finally stopped trying to blame the loneliness. Or the timing. Or even Mark. I started holding up a mirror instead. And what I saw wasn't a villain. Wasn't a temptress. Wasn't a homewrecker. It was a woman who had forgotten how to love herself. Who mistook attention for affection. And secrecy for intimacy. I didn't just lose him. I lost who I was pretending to be, and had to find who I really am. So I started small. I lit candles again, not for romance, but for peace. I played music that made me cry and let myself feel everything. I bought groceries. Real groceries. I took bubble baths and actually stayed in them long enough for the water to go cold. I started sketching again. Even danced alone in the kitchen one night. Not because I was happy, but because I wanted to be. And that mattered. I even took all the clothes Mark ever complimented. The red sweater, the black dress with the slit up the side. And I put them in a donation bag. Because those weren't my clothes. They were costumes I wore for someone else. Now I wanted to wear something for me. I still thought about him. Of course I did. Sometimes I'd pass a man in the grocery store who wore his cologne, or hear a phrase he used and feel my stomach clench. But those moments started losing power. Not because I hated him, but because I stopped needing him to remember who I was. Healing isn't cinematic. It's slow, uneven. It's crying over coffee, forgetting birthdays, and then suddenly, smiling at something dumb on TV and realizing, you didn't think about him that whole day. That's how it starts. I wasn't whole yet, but I was becoming, piece by piece. Not perfect, but mine. 2 years later. I'm in a little bookstore downtown, the kind with the creaky wooden floors and that faint smell of old paper and coffee. The kind of place where you come looking for escape, but sometimes find yourself instead. I'm browsing a shelf, trying to lose myself in the fiction section when I see him. Mark. Across the room. Not with Clara. Not alone, but with someone new. He looks older. More worn. Like the lines on his face have deepened from carrying too much weight, maybe guilt, maybe regret, maybe just the years. Our eyes meet for a split second. Not anger, not love, just memory. I don't know what I expected. A fight? A goodbye? Maybe a spark that would set something on fire again? But there was none of that. Just the quiet recognition of two people who once shared something broken and beautiful. I nod, the faintest gesture, like a secret past between us. He nods back. No words, no explanations, no apologies. I turn and walk away, out of the bookstore, into the daylight. Some stories don't end with a kiss. Some end with a quiet understanding and a promise to never forget. Thank you for listening. Have you ever loved someone you weren't supposed to? That kind of love that sneaks in quietly when your heart's already bruised and broken, but somehow feels like the only thing keeping you alive? Would you risk everything, your peace, your future, your own sense of self, just for a chance at happiness, even if it meant losing it all? I want you to know, you're not alone. Comment below with your thoughts, your secrets, your own stories. I read every single one because these stories matter. They're messy, raw, and real, just like life. And if you want more stories that go where others won't, stories that peel back the layers of love, betrayal, and heartbreak, hit subscribe on Cheating Confession Diary. Because sometimes the hardest confessions are the ones we need to hear the most. Thank you for being here with me.